Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Deep Fried Draft Show. I'm Brian Bosarge. We're going to start tonight. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to do some team-by-team draft reviews with esteemed fellow media here from representing different teams. And I figured what a better way to start out than with the best team in the NFL, the Cincinnati Bengals, tonight. And we're going to bring in my good buddy from CincyJungle.com. He is John Sheeran. John, haven't seen you probably since the 2020 senior, or was it 2019 Senior Bowl? Was it 2 years ago?
I was down there 2020. Obviously,
2020,
didn't want to go down there for this year because just wasn't too ready for that. But definitely missed you down there, Brian. All right, definitely missed being down there with you.
Let's be honest. If I didn't live in Mobile, I probably wouldn't have been down there either. So. We're just gonna dive right into it. It's on everybody's mind. The 2021 draft started, and Chase or Sewell, where were you before the draft started? I think I know.
I didn't want to choose a side because it seemed unnecessary to do so. But the more the discourse not evolved, it devolved. It became deconstructive almost. The more that exposed itself, and you saw the nonsensical rhetoric behind, if you don't take an offensive lineman in round one, you're punishing Joe Burrow. The more I leaned towards Chase, and also I support the data that says one elite wide receiver on his own as an individual is more valuable than one elite offensive lineman, whether he's a tackle or a guard. And that's kind of what led me to believe that not only was Chase the right pick, but it made sense that was the direction that they were going to, because this team had always valued receivers over tackles. If you look at draft history, if you just look at the last 20 years or so, and that's kind of where I kind of planted my flag. And it was almost kind of out of spite, because I respect a lot of people who wanted the Bengals to take Sewell, but I didn't want to associate with some of the other people that said, if you don't take Sewell, then you don't care about Joe Burrow. I never really bought into that, and that's kind of where I was with it.
I was always of the mind that the depth of the offensive tackle class was going to be so good that you could take Chase and still come back in the second round and get, a player that you needed on the offensive line. And I'm also like, you don't have to be the Cowboys offensive line from like 5 years ago for Joe Burrow to be successful. If they're average, Joe Burrow is going to be successful and lead this team to a lot of wins.
Exactly. Like that. And if you want to do that way, if you want to go that route, that's fine. But that takes years and a lot of resources to invest and actually build what the Cowboys had back in like the mid 2000s. But the Bengals weren't ready for that, right? Like they have Jonah Williams, they have Trey Hopkins, they have Riley Reef for now. Like there was still a lot of work to do to transform that unit from just average to below average to elite. And I get the allure of that, but for them to be able to fast track this progress for what they wanted to do, to be able to be competitive in the AFC North and just the AFC entirely, it made sense to not only invest in the more valuable player in Jamar Chase for your offense, but also to take advantage of the depth as a whole in the draft in round two. And that's kind of where they went with it.
Let's move on to the second round here, because Jackson Carman was the pick after the Bengals traded down roughly 8 or 9 spots, I believe it was, with New England, picked up a couple of fourth-round picks. But in the process, they basically gave up on acquiring Tevin Jenkins, who was still on the board, gave up on Liam Eichenberg from Notre Dame. Is history going to be kind to this pick?
It really does depend on Jackson Carman, I guess. Like, I know fans are going to be attached to Tevin for a long time, and it's weird because like the Bengals weren't the only team to pass on him. Like, no one expected Tevin to last that long. We knew that there was like a minor injury issue, which is why he opted out in the middle of Oklahoma State's season last year, but there was also some other injury with his shoulder. And then there were rumors about how, he wasn't exactly the greatest practice player or something like that. It was a lot of stuff that we couldn't quantify and we couldn't obviously confirm, but it did have some weight to it if he lasted for the first 40 picks and just took one team in the Bears to trade up for him. And now I guess they're going to start him at left tackle for some reason. So fans are always going to attach themselves to Jenkins, kind of like they did last year with Josh Jones, who many expected to be like a late first, early second round pick. Then he fell to the Cardinals around 3 and he played like 50 snaps last year. So we don't know how that whole situation is going to go. But I think Carman has the ability to be a solid guard under a great offensive line coach in Frank Pollock. And yeah, the consensus said that he was probably a fringe second, third round player, with more people saying that he was on the third round side. But I don't think that we should look at Jackson Carman like we look at Drew Sample, for example, like an obvious, like taking a clear day 3 player in the middle of the second round. The trade down be damned. I think Carman should be viewed a little bit more generously than that, because I think he does have the potential to be a pretty solid player at a position that best fits his skill set.
That's going to bring me to my next question. Is it fair to judge Jackson Carman in the future of what's going to be the perceived success of Penei Sewell, Tevin Jenkins, etc.?
Like, are any of these judgments fair? Like is it fair for any of us to say what NFL players are and what they aren't? Like, they're NFL players, they're getting paid millions, they're doing what they love, and we're just like sitting here on streamer talking about it. Like, no, it's not going to be tremendously fair to Jackson, who by all accounts is a great kid. He's obviously from Cincinnati. He didn't grow up a Bengals fan, but he obviously knew of the team and he idolized Anthony Munoz. No, it's not fair for us to really compare him to two obviously better players in Jenkins and Sewell, who by all likelihood will become slightly better players than him. But that's just kind of how it goes, I guess. Like, they had the opportunity cost to pass on Penei Sewell with the idea of drafting a similar talent than him, and they chose, whether they think it or not, a risk. A guy who's still a projection right now. He's going to play a position that he's never played before, and that may have been what they would have done with Sewell. They would have played him at right guard this year and then move him out to tackle, and then that would have been its whole thing as well. But it's not fair to compare Jackson Carman to a completely different and right now a better player in Penei Sewell, but that's just kind of how it's going to be, because that was the direction that they passed on.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. It's like, but we all do it because, we kind of have to, but yeah, it's probably not fair. Third round, Joseph Ossai. I believe if they would have picked Joseph Ossai at the 38th pick, would you have been mad?
Not at all. I think he was right around. He belonged right around that range. Like, you don't see that often guys who are that young, who produce that well, and who test that athletically. And I know there was a question mark because he didn't run the short shoulder 3-cone. It's very, very rare for someone to be bad in those drills after being as explosive and fast for his size. So I think Ossai was one of the more safest, honestly, edge prospects in this entire class from a data perspective. There's obviously a lot that he needs to continue working on. And he's still young, and he only played for like 1 year as an edge player. But to get that talent at the top of the third round, it deserves as much credit as it's being given.
It's very easy to see what they like and what they want him. I essentially think he's going to slide right into the Carl Lawson spot this season.
That makes perfect sense. Like, you have Hendrickson and Hubbard as your bases, and you still have a lot of snaps that you need. And you're not going to give him all to Khalid Kareem. He's not exactly there yet. But to just reintegrate yourself with someone who's that explosive and that quick off the edge, even though and it might be unfair to compare him to Carl Lawson right out of the gate. Lawson had 10 sacks as a rookie. He was already really refined as a pass rusher, and he only lasted as long because of a medical. So, like, Ossai is not there from a technical standpoint, but he'll definitely get a lot of opportunities. And I think he does right now. He just wins off hustle and just pure athleticism. And that may work in some cases, but it's not going to be a case where he's getting, 6 or 7 sacks right out of the game. It may be a lot of pressures though. And that's still what they need in spades.
A guy I really liked down here at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was awesome down here all week. Won the defensive player of the game during the Senior Bowl game was Cam Sample. And we're going to get to Tyler Shelvin in just a second, but a lot of people during the Shelvin pick were upset because the Bengals didn't take the obvious need at 3-tech. I think Cam Sample is that 3-tech once he puts on about 15, 20 pounds. And I think that's where he's headed.
Right. So he, I think, measured in at his pro day at 267 right about. And then Bengals.com, Jeff Hobson, he listed him at like 280. So I don't know what weight he's at right now or what the Bengals project him. But if he's playing at like 285, like, I don't see a lot of reason to play him primarily on the edge. Like, when you're in obvious passing situations, second and long, third down, and you need someone to play next to Sam Hubbard inside, you covet that explosion. And he wasn't that productive at Tulane, but that's an element that they simply do not have right now. Larry Ogunjobi is decent in that role, but obviously Sample's still 21 years old, and he's probably even more of an explosive of an athlete. And I'm interested to see they're playing him. Like, obviously he can play on the edge. He played mostly on the edge last season, but for him to be already at what I assume is around 280 pounds, like he's already ready to take on defensive tackles, and he's already ready to take on that role. And like you said, they do need that in terms of a long-term solution.
I watched a few games of his this year, and against South Alabama and against Southern Miss. Not exactly world beaters, of course, but he was, especially against South Alabama, which they played down here in Mobile as well. I mean, he was him and his teammate Patrick Johnson, just the entire second half. It was no bueno for the South Alabama quarterbacks. Tyler Shelvin, I slammed this pick on draft day because he's just so his testing was one of the worst I've ever seen at that position. I know it really doesn't matter for a nose tackle, the testing and all that, but I was very low on him. I didn't think his tape was all that good from 2019, as well as a lot of people did. I know Draft Network Joe Marino messaged me as I was slamming the pick, telling me I need to go back and watch the tape again. Maybe so. I don't know, but I wasn't a fan of the pick.
I mean, I don't think you were alone. I know Dane Brugler had him as a 5th or 6th round pick. And I think a lot of it is because, he opted out and he wasn't exactly a tremendous player before he opted out. So he didn't get that benefit of having recent tape and showing progression. But still, he's going to be 23 years old in July. He's only had one season as a starter, and there wasn't a lot of production in that one season. But again, he is a nose tackle, and he just really only has one job. And I guess if he does that job decently well in the middle of the 4th round, that's not the worst pick in the world. But I understand the criticisms with it. I was indifferent with it as well because he doesn't provide that much of a pass rushing presence. My whole thing is that I wonder what their plan is at that position now, because obviously he can be a long-term backup to DJ Reader, but also you still have Josh Tupou, you still have Renell Wren. Are those guys on the bubble now? Like, Tupou's contract is very expendable. Wren obviously hasn't played that much in 2 years now. So if Shelvin can just be a decent run-stopping nose tackle and play like 10 downs that he needs to play, I think it's fine. But I'm with you. I think they should have probably went for a little bit more upside here. But the LSU connection doesn't hurt.
Right. And we've all seen the video now of him single-handedly hoisting Joe Burrow up on his shoulders. Their other 4th round pick, Deontay Smith, he's another guy that just really looked great at the Senior Bowl. And they went to the Senior Bowl, a few times here during the draft. But Deontay Smith, I think he's got upside here to where it would not shock me if he can take over for Riley Reef once he moves on. I feel that well about Deontay Smith.
I really do feel like he's like the key to this draft. Like, I think they're expecting Carman to hit. I think they're expecting Ossai to be a major contributor, as well as Sample. And they obviously have high expectations for Chase. If Deontay Smith in 2022, 2023, whatever year it is, he maintains whatever weight they put on him and he just fixes a couple things in pass protection, I really do think he can elevate this draft from good to great. Now, I didn't know a lot about his situation. Obviously, he only played one game last year. Like, it was reported there was mystery. It was like a mystery injury. I guess he opted out after that one game because apparently he got quarantined 3 times during the 2020 offseason. He never had COVID once, but he was quarantined 3 times, and he went down to like 280 pounds. That's what he ended up playing at for that one game. But then I guess he bulked up to closer to 300 pounds for the Senior Bowl. Obviously, like you said, showed out there, was one of the best offensive linemen there. And then he tested at 305. I guess there's this concern of whether he can keep that weight, but if you have an 85-inch wingspan and 35-inch arms and you're 6'5", I don't see why you wouldn't be able to carry 305, 310 pounds as well. So I'm glad that we're not going to be able to, I'm glad he's going to be working on stuff this year. Hopefully we don't really see him in action because he's probably not ready yet, but I'm with you, man. If he can just fix up a couple things and keep that weight in 2022 or 2023, you're looking at potentially a special player.
Yeah, if he was never active on game day this entire season, it wouldn't hurt my feelings at all.
Yeah.
I mean, because that would mean he's been pressed into service. I mean, you still have Fred Johnson to be the swing tackle. You really don't need him to play this year at all. Let him sit, learn from Frank Pollock, and move on. 5th round pick, really, it's a kicker. I'm team never draft specialist.
I don't see a problem with that take. Like, it's like, like if another team did it, you would be like, oh, what the hell are they doing? But I mean, the Bengals obviously targeted him. I guess Darren Simmons spent a lot of time with him at Florida's Pro Day, and their whole thing was that if they didn't take him in the 5th round, they were scared someone else was going to take him in the 6th round. And my whole thing with that is, do you not like any other kickers in this draft that you couldn't take a chance on another player?
None other were drafted. There was no other kicker drafted.
So this may end up being a case where they just play themselves. But at this point, knowing what they did 4 years ago, taking Jake Elliott, cutting him after a disappointing training camp, and then seeing him go on with the Eagles, like at this point, I just want them to keep him just so they can just realize that investment, see what it is. Like, whatever, man. It's a 5th round pick.
6th round guys, they drafted Trey Hill from Georgia in the 6th, a center. And I tweeted out after the pick, I watched 10 centers in this draft. He was certainly one of them. I mean, that's just that was my take I had on Trey Hill. He's battled injuries. I'm honestly, I don't expect him to make the 53. I think he's probably going to end up being a practice squad callback. Chris Evans now is kind of intriguing because I was a big fan of Travion Williams when he came out, but he hasn't obviously taken hold of anything since he's been here. So I think Chris Evans has a shot to get that number 3 running back spot.
I agree with you there. Like Trey Hill just screams practice squad, even though I guess they do need center depth with Billy Price in the last year of his contract and Trey Hopkins recovering from injury. But like, there's not a lot of athletic upside with Hill right now, and he's still really young and still has a lot of things to work on. With Evans, though, like I'm really interested to see how many running backs they end up keeping, because if they keep 3 with Evans, he can also play like receiver a little bit. He came to Michigan as a slot receiver and he has receiving production. It's just one of those cases where, you fall out of favor with a new coaching staff at Michigan. He obviously didn't play in 2019 because he was like accused of plagiarism. And then he worked his ass off while he was suspended. He handled it really well, came back, only touched the ball like 16 times in this past season. And he's going to be 24 this year. So that's why he's here in the 2nd round, in the 6th round, but athletic as hell. And he has natural ability as a receiver. So they don't really have a backup slot receiver on this roster right now. And if they plan on using Mixon more and obviously implementing Pirine more, I think Evans has a good chance of not only making the roster, but making somewhat of an impact if certain injuries occur.
Yeah, and last I think it was 7th round pick was Wyatt Hubert. He's another guy. He's a hustle guy. I don't see much upside with him either. He's another one I think would be a long shot to make the 53.
Right. Like he's the 3rd edge drafted. They already had 3 on the roster. Like I don't see them carrying 6. So unless he makes a position change, I think he's destined for the practice squad. But apparently he developed a relationship with Mark Duffner, the Bengals senior assistant defensive coach, ever since the Senior Bowl. And they've been kind of staying in touch. So like at this point, 7th round, it's essentially undrafted free agents that you're making a draft pick for, which makes sense. So practice squad guy, make some noise in training camp, see what happens.
Speaking of undrafted free agents, I made note of a couple of guys here that I don't expect either to make the team, but Antonio Phillips from Ball State. Yahoo had a great story about him. Like I said, I don't know that he makes the roster, but and Pro Wells, tight end from TCU, former basketball player. I thought, tight end, maybe if he has a good camp, maybe he gets in that last spot. Probably not with Thaddeus Moss being best buddies with Burrow, but if they keep 4 tight ends, maybe he gets in the mix.
I would be interested in that. Like he's would be competing with Shrek and obviously Moss, who has a special connection. Phillips, I think, carried a 6th round grade by Dane Brugler, I think a 5th round grade by PFF, and he had ball production at Ball State. I would have liked to see him test, but having them invest so much in the cornerback position, we knew they weren't going to draft one high or at all. So it'll be interesting to see if he can compete with Tony Brown as that last cornerback. And Darius Hodge, unfortunately, again, another edge player. They're not going to have room for any of these guys, but surprisingly really productive and really athletic coming out of Marshall. So I'm interested to see if he makes noise in training camp and keep a practice squad spot.
I would be more surprised. I would be less surprised at Darius Hodge making the roster. I'm glad you brought him up. Less surprised at him making the roster than Wyatt Hubert.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One last, I got one last Bengals question here, and then I got one other question. I'll let you go. Does this draft class make the Bengals a playoff contender? And if so, what do you think the record's going to be this year?
Well, I mean, the biggest impact is Chase, and obviously the biggest wild card is Carman. If Carman is a decent rookie guard, and if Chase immediately comes out and elevates the Bengals offense, Like they're in a spot to make noise. It sucks because of how good the rest of the division is, even with Pittsburgh trending downwards. It really comes down to, like, can this offense that now has the capability of scoring points with the best of them, can it just outlast the division? If they get past those speed bumps and the Ravens and the Browns that they normally can't, like, they have the potential to hover around 500. Now, if everything goes right, then this could be like a 2011, 2012 situation where they just defy everyone's expectations and somehow sneak into the playoffs. And having an extra playoff spot, it definitely helps them with their case. But right now, knowing that eventually something is going to go wrong, hopefully not as disastrous as it was last year, they have the potential to be something great. But just taking it for account of this is the Bengals and typically stuff does go wrong, I'll give them around like an 8 and 9 projected record with a chance to squeak in as the last team.
All right, last question. You're a UC guy there. James Wiggins, safety. I had him as a number 78 overall player, goes to the 7th round. What happened?
Like, 2019, right before the Bearcats became really good, he had like legitimately 3 or 4 game-ending turnovers or tackles or plays, and I'm like, this guy is a legit player. And then he got hurt. Maybe that was 2018. He got hurt, I think, 2019. Then he came back for 2020. So he's on the older side. He's been around UC for a long time. I don't know why he lasted to the 7th round. I don't know if he didn't test well. I'm not entirely sure what his testing numbers were, but just a game-impacting, playmaking safety. And I think he was on Bruce Feldman's like freak list initially. So he has natural athleticism to him. I would like to see him drafted a little bit higher, but I'm glad he did end up getting drafted by the Cardinals.
All right, John, I'm going to let you go. Tell everybody how they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at John2_Sheeran. You can find all of our work at Cincy Jungle. We do a podcast with my co-host, Anthony Cosenza, the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. And yeah, that's about it.
Hey, John, thanks for taking the time out to come on tonight.
Thanks for having me on, Brian.
Appreciate it. That was John Sheeran from Cincy Jungle and the Orange and Black podcast. He's a good friend, and appreciate getting his insights here on the Cincinnati Bengals draft. Hope to see him again at the 2022 Reese's Senior Bowl next year down here in Mobile. That's going to do it tonight for the Deep Fried Draft Show. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Find all my work at deepfrieddraft.com. If you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button, and because we're going to be doing this a lot more here. Like the video, thumbs up, all that good stuff. And until next time,